the places we love, we must vote. America is a nation of many nations, many histories, many experiences. But despite our different paths, we all converged here. You see, our common ground is the land itself, our playgrounds, and places we love. Now we must protect them from the effects of climate change. If you love the land, make a plan to vote this November. Start your plan at makeadamplan.org.
And welcome back to our final episode of Tales from the Trails, episode 6. We are talking with Canyon Woodward, and we are coming at you from Maine. So Canyon, thank you for coming on this evening. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Stoked to wrap it up. It's been an awesome series.
Yeah, it's been great. And I've been really excited about this conversation because I think you have a really unique story to tell.
Well, thanks. I'm stoked about it too.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? Like, where did you grow up and how did you end up? I guess you've been on the East Coast for a while.
Yeah, East Coaster, born and bred. I'm a political campaign manager and trail runner. And I originally grew up on traditional Cherokee lands in Western North Carolina, beautiful backwoods of Southern Appalachia. And I was homeschooled there with my older siblings as a baby of 4. Autumn, Forest, and Rivers were their names. So obviously our parents loved the outdoors and got us on trails and rivers from the earliest ages, and really had a childhood that revolved around the outdoors in the mountains, playing outside, building networks of forts, trying to keep up with my older siblings.
Yeah. So from an early age, it sounds like you were really embedded in like the trail and outdoor culture.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I know that climate advocacy is nothing new to you. Can you tell us a little bit about just your history and why you decided to dedicate yourself to climate?
Yeah, great question. I'll try not to ramble too much. It's definitely a long story, but I think I guess high school was the first time that I was like really exposed to climate change, and it felt super impersonal at that point, like lots of numbers and graphs and kind of a problem for the future. And I think it was the summer of 2011, I went back to Washington State, where I'd lived for 5 years as a kid from 98 to 2002. And I went on a backpacking trip with my older brother, Rivers, and can just so distinctly remember boulder hopping up this familiar ridge that overlooks Lyman Basin and Upper Lyman Lake in the Cascades there. And I remember looking across that basin at Lyman Glacier, where I remember having all kinds of snowball fights in August as a kid, and seeing the front portion of the glacier having like basically calved off, and I could actually see the lines of the glacier that represented eons and eons of snowfall. And that for me was a really powerful moment of just like, oh damn, this is really big and it's happening now, and drove it home in a new way for me, I think. And I started college that fall at Harvard and began really digging into the question of why isn't anybody like really doing anything about this on the scale that we need. And it was painfully obvious that we needed the government to pass serious climate legislation, but not much was really happening. And as I delved into it more, it became really obvious that one of the biggest reasons for inaction was, and still is, the huge influence that the fossil fuel industry has over our political system. So long story short, decided to try and take on the fossil fuel industry directly to try and loosen that stranglehold on politics, and gotten involved with fellow students there, organizing around fossil fuel divestment, trying to get Harvard to take its $40+ billion endowment of fossil fuel companies. So that was kind of my winding path into climate advocacy.
Yeah, that's a pretty big undertaking to take on the fossil fuel industry as an individual. A lot of people and this is interesting, Abby said the same thing on Tuesday. She grew up in New England and she first noticed climate change when she went out west. So it's just, those stark changes that really hit home, and you see like glaciers, that you just can't deny it. It's really sad to see. And so, when people see that, they start to put two and two together, like, oh, wow, like these actions we are doing as humans are contributing. But not many people go the route you've gone with, like, taking on the big industries, the fossil fuel industry. What really inspired you to do that rather than take the traditional steps of like, okay, I'm going to drive less, I'm going to recycle, I'm going to eat plant-based? Because I think a lot of people, that's what they think is going to help solve this climate crisis, when in reality, it's the big industry. So how did you decide to go that direction?
Yeah. I did do some of those things. Like in high school, it was more, on the level of like, let's get high school to recycle, and started being vegetarian. But I think as I delved in deeper, what became clear to me and clear to so many of us is, individual behavior change definitely has a role to play, and we should make good decisions to reduce our impact. But if there's not the political will to take the crisis on at the broad systemic level, where these companies are pouring tens of millions of dollars into climate disinformation campaigns and lobbying and contributing to political campaigns to get kickbacks and billions of dollars in subsidies. If we can't challenge that high level systemic interplay, then it's not going to be enough to get us anywhere close to where we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like a sad reality, and just goes to show that those are the things we need to do. And, the biggest tool we have right now that we can do today is to vote, because that's going to put legislature in place that's going to protect and not fund these fossil fuel industries. And you touched on it briefly, but you were really, I think, one of maybe the person or one of the couple of people involved in Divest Harvard, correct?
It was founded by one of my best friends, a proud Mainer, Chloe Maxman, who's actually the reason I live in Maine now. And I co-coordinated the campaign with her. And
that's pretty incredible. I mean, that's a really big deal. I think it's, talk about what that campaign did, or what it really means.
Yeah. One of the biggest things it did for me on a personal level is just political education and turning me into a real activist. But more broadly, over the course, we started in 2012 and ended up mobilizing over 70,000 people over the course of 3 years, with students voting overwhelmingly in favor of it. We passed a referendum with 72% support, and over 1,000 Harvard faculty signed on to the campaign, and thousands and thousands of alumni, including some really big names like Natalie Portman and Desmond Tutu and Al Gore, who penned a letter being like, hey, go sit in with those kids. It was, I think I think it accomplished some big things. Harvard still hasn't divested, and the fight is still going on. But so many folks came out of that, from political leaders to like the folks involved with the Sunrise Movement and all kinds of activists. And I think a big lesson of the divest organizing for us was that we were pushing really hard as part of this bigger climate movement to create space for political action on climate change, by highlighting the fossil fuel industry's role and trying to stigmatize it. But what we began to realize over those years of organizing is that the outside organizing wasn't enough without also playing that inside game and really being engaged with politics, which was tough for me. I grew up just like totally repulsed by electoral politics. I think like a lot of us, I just looked at politicians and saw these awful, slimy creatures that I wanted absolutely nothing to do with. And, I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't even vote in 2014. But I think, the realization point was that, we can let ourselves be repulsed by politics and run away from it, and get bit in the butt. If we run away from it, it stays that way.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make it go away. So it's like learning how you can get involved and finding some sort of way to find common ground or to get involved that changes your I guess paradigm. And it sometimes we have to get uncomfortable, step into roles that we're not really familiar with or we don't feel great about, to actually make those changes. So that's a really cool, just connection that you've made along the way of like, okay, so if I want to actually make change, I have to join these people. And so one question I wanted to ask you is just some of the parallels you see between trail running and running campaigns, because I'm sure there's some similarities, although they're quite different in application.
Yeah, totally. I think there's so much synergy there. I mean, fundamentally, like a lot of the life force that I get to show up every day to organize comes from trail running and just like being outdoors. Like I think so many of us who are drawn to this POW space really feel just there's something really powerful about the outdoors. And I think in this time especially, we need things that connect us, and trail running is one of those things for me. We share this common connection to the land on the trail that's super powerful, and trail running is also one of those places that I connect so deeply with other people and with the broader community of runners, and also with my own body and spirit. And I think that those three things, the connection to the land and to one another and to ourselves, in this day and age is so important. And I think what I really would love to, what I really wish everyone could experience is that politics can be that too. It's not obvious by any means, because that's definitely not what you think about when you think of politics. But there is a really strong sense of place that politics can be rooted in, especially at the local and state level. And in doing campaign work, you're really forced to look inward and examine your own values. And one of the beautiful, albeit messy and painful parts of that is that you do that in conversation with the people around you too. And fundamentally, it's about articulating and choosing the world that we want to create together. And like you were alluding to, that can get really, really challenging and dark, and like being in a long trail race, like mile 80, it's just like the middle of the night and everything's killing you and you just want to quit and maybe curl up with a carton of ice cream. I feel like that's kind of the moment that we're living through as a country right now politically.
Yeah.
It's where we got to dig deep and put one foot in front of another and push through it.
I really love that analogy, and I can so resonate with that. Usually for me, it's curl up with a bag of chips. But yeah, that's a great way to think of it. And I think that puts it into perspective for us. It's like, okay, we're in this really tough space. We've been, working really hard. Things have been up and down. It's getting super tough. It's probably dark out. And you got to just keep going, because the alternative, giving up, I mean, it's not an alternative. It's like you don't finish. And the feeling of crossing a finish line, whether it be politically or, in a running race, that is an incredible feeling. And I think, yeah, we are in some pretty dark times right now, but we've got our finish line coming up in November, and we don't want to give up now. So pushing through. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with trail running, or just being in the outdoors. It doesn't have to be running. It can be meditating. It can be walking. It can be cycling. It breaks down barriers, and it just lets us, I think, connect as humans, connect like within ourselves, like spiritually to the earth or with other people. And it's not like, all of those sides that we're on, those are gone, and we can just enjoy being in the outdoors. And that's where I think like finding that common ground and just rallying the outdoor state of 50 million people, that we share this love and that feeling of what the outdoors does for us. And that's such an incredible, special thing that we really need to protect it. So I really love how you've been able to kind of take your trail running, the things you've learned, and apply it to what you're doing professionally as well.
Heck yeah. Thanks. And likewise, Stephanie, I'm not gonna be satisfied if I leave this tonight without saying that I would love to see you run for office, and more people in the POW ecosystem.
Yeah.
Watching, and the other folks on this series, we need Claire Gallagher in office. We need Peyton, Abby, and you.
I appreciate that. And I 100% agree with you. We need more people stepping up. And I think for me, this was a good first step of like getting my feet wet. And I can tell you, I'm like, it's so much, there's so much to learn that I don't know. And it's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's this myth that you got to know all the policy and have all this experience to like take a bigger step, like running for office, or even just like volunteering for a campaign or phone banking. And that's not the case. Like, you look at the people in office, and so many of them have no freaking clue what they're doing, and they should not be there and should not be making the decisions that are going to define our futures. So
and that's one thing I've learned with Protect Our Winters is you don't have to know everything. You just have to know what you're passionate about and what you're willing to stand up for. And the rest you kind of figure out as you go. So I think that's been really incredible. And for us as like Trail Alliance members, but also just for anyone who's affiliated with POW, there's ways for your voice to be heard, and there's tools to help you figure out how to make things happen. Like, you don't have to know how to contact your senators or how to have a conversation. There's tools on the website that help with that.
Yeah, I think that's so key. And it reminds me of trail running too, in the sense of like just taking that next step or that first step, whatever it is, whether it's, whether you're biting off 100-miler or going for a short jog, just like getting registered to vote, making a plan to vote, or whether you want to work on a campaign or run for office. It's so much is just about like getting yourself off the couch, getting the motivation going, getting moving, and lacing up your shoes and taking that first step. And then it tends to just like really build on itself from there. the energy builds, and that I think that happens at both an individual and the societal level. And I think that's something that POW is doing so well.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to run 100 miles off the couch. Run to the end of the block first, and that's your first step.
Yeah.
So we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the outdoor and trail culture in Maine. So what's it like out there?
It's amazing. I have so much on my bucket list that is yet to do, just because it's pretty 24/7 on the campaign. I get out a ton on the local network of trails in the Camden area, and this awesome George's Highland Trail network that just runs through all these bogs and mountains and cliffs and lakes, and it's beautiful. It doesn't have any switchbacks. I take so much crap from Western people. I'm like, come and run the trails out east. They just go straight up the mountain.
So true. So true.
Yeah. But yeah, it's amazing. And, so much of what we do in Maine revolves around the outdoors with our tourism industry and all the small farms and lobstermen and fishermen. And yeah, there's so much on my bucket list, from, catching first light in the US in Acadia to the Appalachian Trail terminus on Katahdin, and I'd love to get into the 100-mile wilderness at some point.
Lots of adventures to be had.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like, there's so much recreation and outdoor space in Maine. So I'm not surprised that, there's all these people recreate. It's like, that's probably one of the main things, and the tourism and just the beauty of the state itself. So you'll have to keep us posted on some of those adventures.
Yeah, totally.
We have a question from the audience asking, are there any student organizations at a national level that help stimulate political conversation around climate change?
Oh, great question. Let's see, Divest Ed is an organization that does a lot of support for college students, specifically around fossil fuel divestment advocacy. Yeah, and then in Maine, there's a handful. There's one called Just Me for Just Us that has just sprouted out. That's doing really cool work. Those are a couple that popped to my mind.
Good place to start. Is there an activist that you look up to?
Oh my God, so many. Obviously, one of my best friends, Chloe, who I've mentioned before, she called me up in 2018 and was like, "Hey, I'm running for state house up here," and so that's what actually inspired me to move up here to Maine. I managed her campaign in 2018, and she's the youngest woman in the Maine legislature, and a climate activist to boot. Still, she penned the Green New Deal for Maine and got that passed in the last session. And yeah, she inspires me every single dang day. Yeah, and there's so many more. One other who really roped me into organizing to begin with was a professor named Marshall Gans, who dropped out of Harvard to join Freedom Summers in the South, and then organized with Cesar Chavez in the United Farm Workers Movement, and then finally went back for his 50th reunion, and they roped him into completing his undergrad, and now he's a professor. He was the one who got me into this work. Yeah.
And that's pretty cool to have your role model be someone you work with really closely and to be your best friend. I think that's an incredible like a synergy to have.
Yeah, pinch myself every day.
Yeah. Was there anything else like in Maine specifically that, has popped out to you just in terms of climate or changes in the weather, or just, is there anything to highlight in Maine specifically that, maybe people don't really know about with some of these changes that are occurring?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been here long enough, really, I think, to point out any huge changes. We're coming off of an awful summer with a drought that was so hard on all the small farms around here, and that's something that's expected to get worse with climate change. By 2050, it's estimated that we'll have up to $100 billion in coastal property nationwide underwater, and so much of Maine's coast is what feeds our tourism industry and a lot of our livelihoods. So that's super concerning.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we could highlight changes all over the country, and just the extreme weather and the flooding, drought, and just knowing that, some of our coastlines might be underwater, or are going to be unless we make changes. I think when that's in your state, it really hits home of like, this is a tangible thing. This isn't something like I'm imagining the glaciers or the ice melting in Antarctica. It's like, this is my state. And so I think that's a good note to segue to the making a plan to vote, and just making sure that, whatever you're going to do, just make a plan, share it with your family and friends, because you're much more likely to actually vote. And we know with some of the planning this year with getting an absentee ballot, it's not like you can just do it, just like that. So making some plans ahead of time is really important. And we'll end this session with taking you to Protect Our Winters Make a Plan to Vote tool, which will help walk you through all of the steps you need. So take a few minutes and fill that out and share it with anyone that you think would want, or maybe even not want. Share it with people that you think are, it's a little bit edgy to send to, because I think just seeing this information is so helpful. So, well, I really want to thank you, Canyon, for your time tonight and sharing some of the work that you've done. I think it's really incredible. Your background, how you grew up, and then going into, politics and everything that you've done so far. And we'll be excited to see how the next few months go for you and the campaigns that you're working on. So thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. It was so great chatting, Stephanie.
Yeah. And special thanks to Trail Runner Magazine for sponsoring this series. This was our last episode. So thank you everyone for tuning in. It was a blast to talk with everyone from the different states. And again, with the other episodes, 2 winners from tonight will get a 1-year subscription to Trail Runner Magazine. So thank you for making that possible. And then we're going to end with the Make a Plan to Vote tool. So thank you so much for tuning in.
As runners, we have to stand up for our playgrounds, for the quiet dirt road miles out the back door, the winding path along the river, the forest loop that washes the day away. To protect our winters and our planet, we must protect our trails. Together, with our feet, our voices, and our votes, we can save our great escapes. Make a plan to vote. Join the outdoor state.